Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Really cool stuff to talk about today. Alright, so we're going to start talking about the scientific revolution and how that leads to exploration, which is going to start connecting the entire world, and it's going to vastly improve, I shouldn't say improve initially, it's going to vastly change human civilization once humans realize that the world is a lot bigger and a lot more inhabited and inhabitable than it was before. All right. However, to go from the Renaissance to the exploration period, there's a very important time period that kind of overlaps both of those, called the scientific revolution. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about some of the important people in it. So let me move myself up here in the corner. Boop, 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 boop. Move this thing out of the way. Alright, so the scientific revolution. Experimentation and observation. And observation and experimentation. These are two words you're going to hear a whole bunch if you're in, I dissect that. If you are in science class, you probably, observe, do your experiment, what's your hypothesis and all that. That is a constant in science class. That is something that's going to come out of the scientific revolution. It is about using logic and consistency with looking at anything in society and life and why things happen, is having a baseline for it. So it is observation and experimentation is a huge part of the scientific revolution. Observation means you're just watching something, and then experimentation means you're like kind of playing around with it to see what will happen. Observation and experimentation, pivotal part of the scientific revolution that comes out at the time. So the scientific revolution was where a lot of people started to want to use science and math to explain why things are happening other than religion. So in the Renaissance, people were like, hey, maybe religion won't answer every question. And with the idea of humanism, it's the idea that, hey, we are going to focus on humans. So how do you answer questions as a human? Well, that's where the scientific revolution comes out. You're going to use logic and methods to systematically figure out what the right answers are. Science is a lot of figuring out what the wrong answers are and narrowing down till you get to what the right answer is. So science and math are going to be really important because they are fixated, like they don't change. Science and math are just things that exist. And if you use those in the real world, you can figure out what actually works and what actually doesn't, and you can learn a lot more about your environment and hopefully, in years to come after this, prevent diseases and stuff with this type of information. So why is this good to use science to answer questions? It's because it helps shape the world that we have today. All the fancy technology that you have that you're watching me on right now all comes out, starting with the scientific revolution. But there's some bad to it, and it's kind of an ongoing bad. So when scientists are like, hey, I think I figured out why this thing works, people are still really religious, and people aren't real happy about scientists saying the reason something exists is because science and not because God. As a scientist, if you come up with a new theory on why things work and it's not God did it, you got a lot of blowback. To the point where there were scientists that were tortured and murdered for finding out science stuff because a lot of the religious people felt like it went against their religion to believe that anything could be done naturally without God's intervention. So you had to be real careful in the scientific community when you came up with new stuff to not get tortured to death. So I like this picture. This is the third time we've shown this picture. This is Plato and Socrates and all that. So Raphael made this painting. What this painting is showing is all the philosophers. All right, Raphael has himself painted in here. But the reason this is important for the scientific revolution is these guys here, like a lot of the guys that are here, these great leaders in history, these guys all were focused on science, on logic, and not necessarily on just religion, which shows throughout time that the most influential humans are the ones that base stuff in logic and not always just in religion. There's absolutely a place for religion in all of this, but it's trying to find that balance, and this is the first time science is like, hey, maybe we have some ideas here. So the question here is, the scientific revolution directly challenged what? And how could that be extremely dangerous for the first scientists? So as we talked about, who got a little squirrely about science? Who actually didn't like science and thought it kind of challenged them? So sit here and explain that in complete sentences. You can pause me if you need to, and we're going to go on. All right. So there's this guy, Galileo. All right. So Galileo creates a telescope. All right. And this is a perfect example of how the church interacted with science. So Galileo created a telescope, and he could see the moons of Jupiter. All right. He could see other planets, figured out the solar system. He's like, oh my gosh. And here's the big one. The earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around. So he runs out and he's like, hey guys, guess what? I just figured some stuff out. The earth revolves around the sun. This is why we have seasons. This is why all this stuff happens. That's awesome, right? The church, not a big fan of that. All right, a little cartoon here. All right. Let me move myself over so you can see the church's reaction to that. So Galileo, when he presents this, the church has been under the impression that the earth is the center of the universe, that we as the earthlings are the most important thing in the entire universe. All right. Well, now also let's point out, Galileo clearly understood that planets were round. Like the whole flat earth thing, by this point Galileo had already disproven that, but that's a whole nother thing we'll get to later. So what happened is when he showed up and said the earth is not the center of the universe, we revolve around the sun, the church is very angry at Galileo. So they arrest him, and they're going to torture him and then murder him if he doesn't say he made it all up and it's all fake. So, and you know what? I give Galileo a lot of credit for this, because you know what he says? You're right, I made it all up, it's fake. Galileo doesn't want to get tortured to death. Oh, who would? So he's like, oh, yep, I made that up. I'm sorry. Everything I said is false. Sorry, please don't kill me. And they're like, glad to see you came to your senses. You can go. So Galileo doesn't really get to make any money off of his discoveries, but he does record them. And years later, when cooler heads prevail, they look back at his stuff, and he rightfully gets the credit in the history books today. But yeah, when he came out with it, he's like, look what I found out. And they're like, we're going to murder you. And he's like, I was just joking. Nope. Center of the universe right here. Flat earth. Whatever y'all want to believe. So there's a lot of times to be a martyr. And Galileo's like, does it really matter? I've made the discovery. People are going to find out about it eventually. Why am I going to, why would I continue to fight this and then be killed for it? So, him using logic based on pros and cons as a scientist, that's probably a smart decision. Just be like, you got me. I'm a liar. Y'all read my books when y'all aren't crazy. All right, so Galileo, the question here is, Galileo was completely correct on his scientific discoveries, but made a confession in front of the Spanish Inquisition. Remember, they're the super religious ones that were already torturing people for anything they thought went against the church. He gave a confession in front of the Spanish Inquisition that he had made it all up. Why would he do that? So we just got done talking about that. So answer that in complete sentences. If you need to pause me, you're more than welcome to. All right. So there is this dude, Isaac Newton. All right. So Isaac Newton discovers gravity. Now, it actually hurts your brain if you really think about it. The fact that nobody had ever thought about gravity. Now, Isaac Newton, apparently sitting under a tree, and an apple fell on him. That's the story he tells, so that's why it's, it probably isn't fake. He probably saw an apple fall. Maybe it did fall on him. And he starts questioning, why did that fall down? If you'd never thought about gravity in the history of your entire species of humans, to be like, why does that fall down and not up? Nobody's ever been to outer space. There's no sci-fi stuff. Nobody has any idea of weight. That's not a thing. So why does it fall down? That's a deep question. If you've never thought about it, that is a really deep question. And he was like, I'm going to solve that. And so Isaac Newton, all right, so explain to you how smart Isaac Newton is. In order to figure out gravity, he has to not only use a bunch of math, he has to invent new math. Isaac Newton invents calculus, all right, which is a course that a lot of people can't even pass. I would struggle mightily in calculus, and I'm a relatively math-minded person. So not only does he good at math, he invents calculus just to prove gravity. So Isaac Newton discovers the laws of gravity, all right? And then he understands how universes and gravity works and how everything rotates around each other. And basically how we understand the universe works today comes from Isaac Newton. Now, when he's like, hey, figured out a new thing, you imagine all the Spanish Inquisition sharpening their knives. They're like, what'd you discover? All right. And he's like, figured out how the universe works. And they're like, get him. And he's like, but hold on. Isaac Newton not only is really book smart, he has common sense. He goes, the reason the universe exists and the reason all this cool sciencey stuff exists is because God made the universe. I just showed you how awesome his creations are. By presenting it like that, they're like, we like what you're saying. So Isaac Newton doesn't suffer the same fate as Galileo, even though Galileo just got away from it. Isaac Newton is smart enough to say the reason it's super cool, all right, and the reason this is important is because God made it all. So he still gave credit to God and says the reason science exists is because of God. And that is why he's able to escape the absolute fury of the religious people who didn't want to have anything to do with it. So the question is, Isaac Newton discovers the laws of gravity as an explanation for how the universe moves and how gravity works. How is he able to avoid the same fate as Galileo? All right. Who does he say created gravity? So we just got done talking about that. Answer that in complete sentences, and we're getting ready to move on. All right. Oh, well, I got a little. Where's my? Hey, little ship showed up. That animation doesn't work with the different versions of PowerPoint. All right. So, European exploration. In the 1400s, explorers began to sail around the world. Oh, Christopher Columbus. All right. Let me tell you the story of Christopher Columbus. Let's see if this works here. Click on this. All right. Boop. 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 All right. So this here is the world. All right. And I'll move myself down here. So this here is the world. We're going to start today. There's a guy here. Let's come in here. Here in Italy, all right. This is where this guy Christopher Columbus is from. He's Italian, all right. And he's an explorer. Now the story with Christopher Columbus is the idea that he was the first guy that's like, I'm pretty sure the world is round. He's not. Most smart people since Galileo understood the Earth was round. It is shocking to me that that is now a debate in modern society with people that want to argue whatever. Flat earthers frustrate me. Can't use logic against the logic. All right. So he's here in Italy. All right. Italy's not a super strong country. The most powerful country at the time here in Europe is Spain. All right. So Spain has the Spanish Armada, the most massive navy on earth. Just absolutely enormous navy. All right. So nobody wants to mess with Spain, rightfully so, because if you sell out here and Spain decides to sink you, they're going to sink you. Now, Christopher Columbus, who is in Italy, all right, he believes that he can find a quicker route to get to India. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about here. There is a country right here called India. Has a whole bunch of spices. All right. Now, spices are incredibly important. Yes, there's a lot to make the food taste better, really change the bland food. Also, spices like salt. Salt is a very important spice. The reason salt is so important is because it preserves food. They didn't have refrigerators back then, so if you had meat, it would go bad. Like if you kill a deer and there's a family of four, that deer is going to go bad long before you can eat it all. But if you cover it in salt, all right, you can preserve it much longer and it won't go bad. So salt is very important for meat storage. All right, so everybody needs salt, and India has a ton of it. So if you're like a salt merchant, you make bank. All right. However, if you're like Christopher Columbus or any of these other people, and now he's an explorer, but if you're just a merchant, I guess, in Europe at the time, here's how you would have to get to India. There is no way of cutting through here as it would look like at the time. There is today, but not then. They would have to go from Europe all the way around Africa. All right. All the way around Africa, around the tip of South Africa, and all the past Madagascar, wave at all the animals, all the way up here to India, all right? Get all your spices and then go all the way back around, and it took forever. Now, you do this on a ship and not by land, even though land would be closer, because ships can carry a whole lot more than wagons can, and it's a lot more dangerous and stuff like that going around here. So, this is what everybody had to do to get spices. Christopher Columbus believes that the earth is nowhere near as big around as it is. He thinks, all right, if he just sails out here and just goes out this way, out into the middle of nowhere, all right, people thought this might be the end of the world. They didn't know what was out here. That if he just came out here, that since the world is round, if he just comes out here, he's going to run into India. So he knows India. So if he goes down in this direction and then cuts straight across, he is going to run into India. So let me show you on this globe what he thinks exists and what doesn't exist. All of this stuff he doesn't think exists. Not only that, he thinks the earth is a lot smaller. So he thinks he's going to run into India around in here. So he thinks like where America is like where China and stuff is, and the India will be down here. Nobody has from Europe has attempted that. So he thinks if he comes this way, he's going to end up, look at all this stuff he has no idea exists, like the Pacific Ocean. He thinks the Atlantic and the Pacific are the same ocean. You can come over here. Now, I'm not really sure what his logic is, because surely they know about the Philippines and Indonesia and all this. I don't know how he thinks he's going to make it through all of here and then end up in India, because that's what he's going to think. But he thinks he can come across here and hit the India, and it's actually going to be shorter to do that, to go all the way that way, as opposed to just going around Africa and up here to India. All right. So he has his game plan. He is convinced of it. So he goes and asks Italy, hey, fund me to go do this. And they're like, no, we're not sending you out there to die in the middle of nowhere. All right. So he goes to Spain. So he's Italian, but he goes to Spain and asks Spain, hey, send me out here. Now, Spain, they're like, no, you're just going to die. But Spain's really rich and they're really powerful. And they're like, well, I mean, if he's willing to go out there and die, all right, we'll fund you to go out there and die. And we're like, we'll pay you when you get back, kind of thing. You know, like we'll get you set up, but all your payment's really going to happen when you get back, because they think this guy's not coming back. Spain's so powerful in the Navy. If there's a 1% chance this would work, Spain wants to, Spain wants to control this route. So that's why Spain agrees to send Christopher Columbus out here. Now, Christopher Columbus is a turd for a whole bunch of different reasons. He's not a very likable guy. He's not a good guy. But just want to put that out there. So don't feel bad when I get ready to make fun of him, because it's worth it. So Christopher Columbus is going to sail from Spain and go to India. He's going to set off and he's going to come across the ocean. All right. And I got another map here. Let me get rid of this. Hopefully this doesn't. All right. Let me put myself back up here in the corner. He leaves Spain, all right, and goes all the way over here, all right, going across the Atlantic Ocean. When he gets here, he's expecting to start hitting India, and they run out of food, all right. There's real close to a mutiny on the ships, but he's past the point of no return. Means they can't go back because they don't have enough food to make it back. A lot of tension, and all of a sudden he sees land. Now, Christopher Columbus has never been to India. All he knows about it, that's right. Think about that. He's like, wait a minute. All I know is they're brown, and they don't speak my language. Right? They don't speak Spanish. They don't speak Italian. They don't speak English. They speak a different language. Right? So he shows up over here in the Caribbean. He sees land. He gets off the land. He's like, oh my gosh, did we find it? All of a sudden, there's people that show up, and they're brown people, and they don't speak any language that he knows, and they have spices. So guess what? He takes the spices, pays them and whatever, gets back on the ship, comes back to Spain, and is like, I did it. I did it. Spain's like, you did what? He's like, I went out there to India, got stuff from the Indians, and came back. He has no idea that he did not go to India. That is why Native Americans in America, or this whole 2 continents, are called Indians. Because Christopher Columbus called them Indians because he thinks he's in India. Comes all the way back. Now, he did bring spices back. And they're like, this ain't legit. He's like, it is. I can do it again. And they're like, all right, double or nothing. Do it again. It's like, fine. Christopher Columbus gets back on a ship, sails back across, goes to another island, gets more spices, comes back to Spain, told you, and everybody's mind is blown. And like, he's like, I found a way to India. I found a way to India. So everybody believes now that he has found something out here, but everybody else that can do the math of how big the earth is, they're like, there's no way he made it to India. He's 100% convinced he made it to India. He dies a couple years later, 100% convinced he found a new route to India. At no point does Christopher Columbus ever realize what he actually discovered is a new route to these 2 continents. So after he dies, all right, then other explorers are like, let me see that map. And they come out after him and come over here and start mapping this area. And that's when everybody's like, oh my gosh, look what we just discovered. All right. So they didn't invent it. They discovered it as far as for Europe. There's millions of people that already live here that are Native Americans, fully functioning societies. They don't need any help, no intervention. They're cool with the way things have been going for thousands of years. Extremely advanced civilizations over here by really anybody else's criteria, with the Aztecs and the Incas here in South America. I'll throw this little picture up here of people like, oh, everybody thought he was going to sail off the end of the world. Only morons thought that, just like today. Same type of people who believe, people that believe the earth is flat, I wouldn't say are morons as in they can't comprehend it, but there is like this massive issue in society with people believing in random conspiracy theories. Anyway, I could go off on that, but I'm not going to. Earth is not flat. Earth is not flat. You're not going to sail off the edge of it. There's no ice wall. Game of Thrones style. None of that. All right. So why did Christopher Columbus call the Native Americans Indians when he landed in North America? We had talked about that in detail.